so much, Alex. Our honorary board member of the Serbian Institute, Branko Tezic, is a former commissioner of the U.S. Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, commissioner of the State of Wisconsin Public Service Commission, an international consultant to corporations and governments on energy. He has held many notable positions in the government and has received several very high honorary titles from Prince Alexander of Serbia. Please welcome Branko Tezic.
Thank you very much, Danielle. My message will be very brief and very, I think, direct. My message is this: it is never too late to do the right thing. I came, and this is the right thing. I came to Washington in 1990 to accept a presidential appointment. At the time, Yugoslavia started to fall apart, and we discovered that the Croatian national entities, the Albanian, Kosovar national entities had been working for decades, creating organization, funding programs, preparing for that. And the Slovenes, of course, opportunistically went along, and yet Serbia and the Serbian people found themselves unprepared. Both the Serbian government, at that time a crypto-communist government under Milosevic, found itself both unprepared and making dramatic mistakes. Serbian Americans here were conflicted between the desire to support the Serbian nation and the Serbian people, but at the same time not support a new communist regime and a new communist system in that country. Unfortunately, it took a decade for the Milosevic regime to leave, at which time a new democratic government came in from among the opposition, led by the late Zoran Đinđić. That government extended its hand here, sending us fine ambassadors, extending a hand to the diaspora, offering to work with us, trying to do the right thing, but with a tremendous economic crisis where the GDP of the country had dropped by something like 90%. There was no way the impoverished people of Serbia were going to send funds here to do what Serbian Americans should have been doing all along, looking out for our own interests, looking out not only for our interests, but the interests of our children and the interests of future generations when they appear in the classroom and tell people that they are Serbian, to not have the overhang of the tremendous bad publicity which we had experienced over the last 20 years. And so my message in Serbian, I remember and all the times when I was moving through various positions, I would go to my father, who many of you knew. He lived with us here up until a few years ago when he passed away. And I'd say, well, Dad, Tata, what do you think about my taking this position or doing that? And he would always say the same thing. He'd say, samo napred, sine, samo napred. And so I leave you with two thoughts. Bolje ikad nego nikad I samo napred.
Thank you so much, Branko. And now I would like to read a letter from our Vice President, David Vujic, who sends his regrets that he could not join us tonight because of medical reasons. Mr. Vujic has spent many years of his career advising clients in Congress and executive branch, and he worked on Serbian issues on Capitol Hill. David Vujic writes, "The emerging Eastern European states in general, and Serbia specifically, have failed to create long-term policy constituencies in the United States. There have been virtually no dedicated specialist Serbian organizations that have effectively helped to position or embed their interests in the U.S. policy communities. There have been attempts at short-term lobbying operations with limited results. The transformation of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia into the Republic of Serbia has occurred in such a way that the country's interests may find the goals and objectives of the Serbian Institute a complement to its quest for democratization and a market economy. Similarly, we have mutual interests with Balkan countries such as Greece and other Orthodox Christian nations, which are being insufficiently represented in Washington. These interests have been inadequately addressed for a number of reasons, and the Serbian Institute is designed to fill that void. The Serbian Institute's solution to the challenge to bring about a more balanced, effective policy in Washington lies in the creation of our highly focused organization of expertise capable of actively representing the specific interests of Serbia and the Balkans, to include a strategically based policy-level research educational organization focused on the appropriate policy levels. The Serbian Institute is most fortunate in that it includes the expertise of best qualified professionals prepared to address issues concerning the American Serbian community, to challenge offensive legislation and media disinformation, and introduce our community as an active participant in the American political and social spectrum. I'm honored to have been selected as an officer of the Serbian Institute and pledge my support and expertise to its success. David Vujic, Vice President of the Serbian Institute. And now a few words from one of our directors, Predrag Pajic, who has spent a good many years of his career at the Library of Congress, and he is an expert on South Slavic studies. Please welcome Mr. Predrag Pajic.
To get up. I'm very honored and, to tell you the truth, very puzzled what to talk after this distinguished and very good speakers who explain our mission. What I really want to say that since Serbian Unity Congress more or less limited very much, if not completely, step out. You know, in Washington there is a really need of some Serbian emigres or native Serbian in American society, their voice. And I'm very welcome that we have an institute led by somebody who proved to be excellent writer and author of several books, you know, and active person, and very energetic and purry, I would say. And they all think, I believe very much that we need to have a voice, and voice is you. And we can exist only if you help us. And very soon there is going to be issues of Serbia participation in the World War I, you know, where the issue is quite often that Serbia is responsible for the war, which was not true, you know, and so forth. So somebody has to work on that and use media and use Congress and use all kind of opportunity to have a truth out rather than what was generally believed, you know. And a lot of work this institute has, if we all, with your suggestion too, you know, start working concretely and together with the Congress, and the voice of you must be heard in Washington. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Pajic. Viktor Pregl is our Serbian Institute treasurer and a transactional lawyer with broad expertise in representing governmental entities, public and private companies. Please welcome Viktor Pregl.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming tonight. The first thing I'd like to ask everyone to do is please give Danielle a round of applause for organizing this tonight. The only time I've been involved in trying to organize anything like this is when I tried to help with the planning of my wedding. My fiance and her sisters fired me from that job pretty quickly, so I think it's best to leave things like this to people who know what they're doing. I want to talk briefly tonight about what I think is the most important single factor when it comes to peace and stability in Serbia over the long term, the Serbian economy. As many of you probably know, the story of Serbia's economy since the breakup of the former Yugoslavia is not completely a happy one. The period before the democratic revolution that led to the establishment of the current democratic government that we see today was characterized by an economy that existed to serve the needs of the people in power and their political allies, rather than the Serbian people. That period saw a decline in the standard of living for the average person in Serbia, which was an extremely sad situation because many economists looked at Serbia with its educated labor force, abundant natural resources, and strategic position is one of the potential economic engines of the Balkans. But war, corruption, and isolation from the rest of Europe led to a lost decade in terms of economic growth. The 2000s saw the beginning of real growth for Serbia's economy. The establishment of a stable democratic government, which went through some growing pains, obviously, opened up Serbia to foreign investment and showed foreign business leaders and politicians the potential that exists in Serbia. Average economic growth in the last 10 years has been about 4.5%, which is a very impressive rate. The liberalization of the Serbian economy is an impressive story, and the Serbian government should be commended for its continued efforts to improve the life of the Serbian people. Per capita GDP has grown from $1,200 per person in 2000 to $6,500 in 2008. The picture is not all that rosy, unfortunately. For those of us living in DC, the Great Recession was mostly mild. For many Americans, it was far worse. And for a transitional economy like Serbia, the effects have put in danger the gains of the past decade. Serbia went through a double-dip recession, and current unemployment is just under 24%. As our friends from other southeastern European countries know, the last few years have tested the resilience of people living in the region. There are fears that young people in the region will leave their home countries and continue the diaspora that has brought so many of us here. Though more Serbs and Greeks would be a benefit to the US, it would be best, in my opinion, that everyone in these countries has the same economic opportunities that we take for granted here. One of the most important factors in creating a stable economic environment in Serbia is the encouragement of foreign investment. And the best way to do that is to educate American politicians and business leaders about the advantages of investing in Serbia. Serbia has a long history of international commerce. In a recent poll of investors by the German Chamber of Commerce, Serbia came on top as an investment destination in southeastern Europe. Serbia's educated population, stable democratic government, low labor costs, free trade agreements with many European countries, and strategic position will hopefully lead to a bright economic future. Before I finish, let me finish with a personal anecdote. My paternal grandmother told me that her life saw her as a citizen of 3 countries, none of them by choice. She was born in the Austrian Empire, lived most of her life in Yugoslavia, and spent her last years as a citizen of Serbia. Let's hope the 21st century is less turbulent for the people of Serbia. Thank you all for coming tonight, and please enjoy the rest of the night.